When I worked for the New York Times company many years ago, and I was a brand new manager, my folks on the help desk actually helped the publisher of the New York Times company. And I got a phone call from him. And of course, being young and inexperienced, almost had a heart attack when I saw that name pop up on my phone. But he called me to tell me that he had had a reason to call the help desk, which he didn't normally do. For whatever reason, he had needed to take care of something himself. And he was so pleased with the service that he received. And he said, it was very clear that the person I spoke with had no idea who I was. And that was true. It was somebody who was new. And he said, it was such a pleasure to see the kind of service that other employees receive. And I thought to myself, how powerful was it that he utilized the resource that all of our employees use, took the time and trouble to compliment that employee, and then took the time and trouble to let the manager of that employee know. What a powerful example was he setting for a very senior leader. And so, so I think there's something to be learned from that kind of an attitude, that sitting in an ivory tower does not do you well if you don't really know what's going on. And if you're responsible for a culture, well, if you're separated from the reality of that culture, then how can you be responsible for something that you don't even know?
And being highest on ladder, it means that you should be the face and also act as those values are in that sense. The action speaks louder than words, definitely.
In the previous episode, I began the conversation with Linda Lenox about fear, courage, and what it really takes to create psychological safety at work. Today, we're picking up exactly where we left off, diving even deeper into trust and what it means to lead with presence rather than pressure. If you haven't already, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And at the end of the show, I will tell you more about how you can boost your 2026 and step in with more confident action. But now let's dive into the conversation.
And I think it's also important to don't ask the questions if you're not going to be open to the answers. So that's something else that we see, like with things like employee satisfaction surveys. We send these out, and then sometimes the feedback that we receive does not make us feel good. So you can choose to brush it under the rug. You can choose to maybe blame a manager. But what it should be doing is setting something up that you're open and honest and have further conversations and ask the questions, understand the why, so that you're solving the right problem, not punishing somebody for either speaking up or punishing somebody who may just simply be the messenger. Because we often hear about that, don't shoot the messenger. But how often do we put a manager in place of being the man and being the messenger, and then we leave that poor messenger out there to dry when the message isn't well received? So I think that's another thing. But I think it all comes down to everything we're talking about. All comes down to the transparency and the willingness to listen, to sometimes tough messages. That willingness to be the courageous leader who says, you know what, the buck stops with me, and being that courageous leader who will set an environment of conversation and communication up and make it safe for people to speak up. And it seems simple, but it's really not, is it? Because there's so many people involved. One person by themselves can make the difference, but can they make a big enough difference? And I think that would be a very difficult place to be if you're caught in the middle. You're trying to make a difference, but the pressures are coming down on you. How long can somebody stand up to that? How long can they handle that if they're getting it from both directions at that point?
I have experienced in sense really clearly. We had a town meeting in one of companies I was meeting was two big shots, CEO and one reporting to him as well. They were both new to the company, so they were presenting themselves, and both of them said like, oh, I'm really good at listening, so I really like to hear good suggestions on improvements, etc., and so on. That is definitely my forte. I'm always available. The funny part in this, they both showed, so to say, how good they were during that day, because later on that day I met them, both of them, and during that town hall meeting I had asked a question to them both, the same question, and they had answered it. And then I met them again, and the CEO, he was like, oh yeah, that was you that asked that question. It was a tricky one, but how would you like to answer that one? I'm curious to hear. So he was rather fast in that sense, and we had a good conversation. The other person, he was standing on the side at that point, so he could definitely hear all the conversation as well, but he was standing there with his phone and checking and and that way. So he was definitely not interested at all at that point. So he really showed that there was action and word was not really corresponding there. I tested him later on, a few weeks later, and it was similar there, because then he didn't want to have any improvement suggestions at that point.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So when somebody does something like pick up their phone during a conversation, regardless of what the reason is for that person, whether there was an emergency or something going on, the message that's being sent is, I'm not interested in what you have to say. I'm not interested in you.
Yeah.
And so that is a great observation. I think being present, so we talked about authenticity and we talked about transparency and building trust. But I think being present was not something that we mentioned, but being present is also a very important skill for a leader to have with their people. So we talked about things like employee satisfaction surveys. That is, don't ask for input unless you're willing to do something with it. That's the other thing too. You don't get brownie points for asking the questions if you're not willing to hear the message and take an action, or at least give feedback on the input. Maybe there are explanations that you need to give, but you've still got to take an action on that feedback, on that information that you asked for. So like, for example, you were saying about having that meeting with those two senior people, and then one of them is on the phone. Well, clearly he was not planning on doing anything with the information that you were providing him, as going through the motions, like play acting like you're the engaged leader, but you've got to be that person.
And I think that also, because everything can happen, as you say, also that there is an emergency, something or so, but then be open with that. Like, sorry, but I definitely need to check this now because there is an emergency here. So
Right.
But to be aware of that, the signals sent out can be interpreted in many ways.
And none of them positively.
Yeah.
That's where kind of like also making a commitment. We will take this up again. I will put something on your calendar or whatever that looks like, but make that commitment and then keep that commitment. Again, building trust.
I speak about like, you should be able to say 3 words as a leader, like thank you, I really appreciate in that sense, and then I need help because we can't do it all ourselves, and I'm sorry. If we can use all these 3 words, I think that we can create an environment actually that is more safe and not so much fear in it.
What you just said is so true, is say please, say thank you, be willing to ask for help, and be willing to take responsibility. I think those things are incredibly powerful in building trust and setting up an environment where people aren't afraid. So if they know that the buck stops with you, then they're going to share more. They're going to try more. It's hard to see how that's a losing proposition in any way.
I spoke to a friend of mine that has researched leaders, senior leaders actually here in Sweden. And through her research, she found that 75% of them have imposter syndrome coming to decision making. So the higher
Mhm.
you are in the hierarchy, the harder it is for them to really take a decision due to imposter syndrome. And I correlate that in some way, that it's a fear of doing something wrong, not be able in that sense to take a decision.
And you think about that, because the more senior somebody is, the less likely people are to view that person as being unsure in any way, right? Because we think, oh, well, if you've got this far in your career, you have all the answers, and you clearly have all this confidence, and you have all the answers. And that's a very interesting observation, that the more senior you get, you still have those feelings of insecurity, and should I really be in this seat, in this role? Am I as good as somebody else thinks I am? But then again, if you are unsure, being willing to make yourself vulnerable by surrounding yourself with good people, and then being willing to listen to those people rather than maybe masking your own insecurity with hubris, you make yourself stronger if you're willing and consider these opinions, and if it is safe for people to disagree with you and to give you the benefit of their experience and their knowledge. I think that is a great way to maybe tamp down the negative side effects of imposter syndrome. Of course, I don't have a study, that's just a thought.
No, but it's really interesting, and the higher you go or rise in a company, the less you know. It's much more overview and oversight you need to have. That means that you need to trust them, that is working for you, that they actually have better knowledge and better into the details, ability to go into the details, if we say it like that.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I would say, it was like the further I moved on in my career, the further I was from the support desk, which was always my first passion and my first love. I love that one group in IT that has one foot on the side of the business and one foot in IT, and they're such an important group. And I would reinforce that some of the best ideas come from the front line, and you've got to be safe and willing to listen to those ideas that are coming up, and then make sure that the credit for that idea makes its way back down, the dam letting the good go through, right? And I mean, again, powerful for building trust, and powerful for building confidence, and powerful for you, because then, to your point, you know what's going on. Whereas if you hadn't have been open and willing to listen, then you would have had a very important piece of information missing. Being willing to listen and put yourself out there, and not get caught up with so many meetings and with your peers that you forget that there are very valuable groups of people that you should be building relationships with as well.
We started in some way, they said that what if we could help someone that maybe is entering into the workforce, a junior, just starting out, be operating more out of confidence rather than being from a fear perspective, because doing it means that they can do better job. What would we give as an advice for that person to help them in their day-to-day?
Well, I think you've got to remind yourself that you wouldn't have been hired into that role if somebody didn't feel like you could do that job. So I think that is, sometimes you have to have that conversation with yourself in the mirror, that I deserve to be here. And I think if you find yourself in an environment where fear is rampant, I think you need to question whether or not you're in the right company. Maybe that's not the right place for you. And then be willing to speak up and have that courageous conversation. I can honestly say that telling the truth and being honest and respectful at the same time, I don't think it's ever harmed my career. Sometimes I said things that somebody didn't want to hear, but I think overall it never harmed my career. And I think, it's like just reminding yourself that you deserve to be there, and have the courage to speak up and speak your truth. And if you have an idea, speak up, build a reputation of being honest and being transparent, being somebody, that go-to person, because they know if they come and ask you that question, you'll be the one that they know that they can get the truth from. And then try to find yourself in a place where the culture is not one of fear and hunkering down. If your coworkers are all like, just be quiet, don't say anything. If the last person who spoke up lost their job, who wants to work there? No, I would say my advice to that person would be to get out. It's your earliest opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's based on the why in one way. Why am I willing to put up with this? I have been in those kind of situations. I have not changed so many jobs, if we take it like that. So I've been there for a long time, and a company change over time. And sometimes it was definitely out of fear the organization was operating. At that point, I asked myself, like, okay, am I willing? I have talked to my manager, but no change, so to say, or such. But okay, am I willing to take the next step then? The manager's manager to take that honest conversation with that person, if that is interested to listen, maybe. Most often, those conversation has been really good, I would say. And if they haven't been, at that point, I could say that, okay, I have done my best. It means that I now need to find another place. But I have at least tried, so to say. And of course, we don't need to agree. There has been, of course, those situations where we don't agree, but we have had really good conversation about it. And that also encouraged me to, okay, I stay a little more. Maybe we can change it in some other way, so to say, or find another way. I understand more from their perspective at that point.
That's a great point too. If you're working in a culture where you can have that skip level meeting, that is amazing. I literally worked for somebody who sat me down and said, and this was my first meeting with this person, who said to me, Linda, you know how this works. Your husband was in the military. We have a chain of command. I expect loyalty, and I expect that you only come to me. And I was like, I don't think I want to work for you. So that was literally the conversation, which just stunned me. It was that was a person who was operating out of fear.
Yeah, I had one of those, unfortunately, but in one way, I got fired after that, because not the manager's manager. That person thought that it was good opinions, etc., but the manager was offended. So I was given a treatment to walk away. But the thing was that I have reviewed that and reflected on that several times afterwards. And I have come to the conclusion I wouldn't done anything different. So I'm proud of what I have done. And the thing is that I got a much better job afterwards in another company. And I'm happy for that. So in the end, I'm actually had said thank you to my previous manager to giving me actually a much better job and much better manager as well. That's how it can go sometimes.
I love your candor on that and your honesty. And I will match your honesty with my honesty. It was not long after that we had a couple of more spirited conversations that I found myself caught up in a layoff. And I think that was kind of where you and I were having that conversation about fear and courage. I've been laid off twice in my life, and the first time I was laid off, I had kids at home. I had one in university, I had a big mortgage. My husband had just changed careers and had just graduated from dental school, and so there was a lot of fear there because of the financial pressures and the family pressures and the number of people that were relying on me. And unfortunately, 5 weeks later, I landed somewhere else. And so, as to your point, I actually ended up in a much better job. But when the second layoff happened, which was more than a decade later, where I went through another layoff, it was, I'm good. I have nothing to be afraid of. And, it's not from a financial or a family situation. So what do I want to do now? What have I just been freed up to do now? What do I want to do? Where's my passion? So, and that was very freeing, because then I started taking risks that were based on passion, I guess, and interest, rather than I have to do this and I have to say this because, I can't put my job at risk and I need to keep my head down and all of these things that are so counter to who I am as a person. It's situational, I think. So I think we also have to be careful about giving that advice to people, because having been in the position where I had a lot of financial obligations that had I not been able to land somewhere else quickly, I, could have potentially like been struggling versus I'm not in that same situation anymore. It's different, right? Different point in your life and a different circumstances that enable you to handle things differently. It changes your fears, like having fears versus not having fears. So
all my guests here gets the same question is about, since it's named confident leadership, I'm curious about what confident means for them, so to say. So I'm curious, Linda, if you would describe confident, what does that mean for you?
I think for me, confidence is the confidence that I am going to be true to myself, and I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be transparent. And I know that I am giving you my best, and I'm giving you my honesty. And I'm good with that. I know who I am. I think I've always known who I am. That's what it means to me. It's just, I feel good in my skin. I know who I am. So yeah. I'm okay with that.
That's a good definition, being true to yourself. We have already been speaking a lot now. If we are to someone now that will go out in a new day or new week, maybe, how would we boost that person to maybe take an uncomfortable discussion?
I believe in taking the emotion out of it, coming forward with honesty, with facts, and just don't tap dance around it. If you've got something to say, then say it.
Mm.
And recognize that somebody may not want to hear it, but at least you can look at yourself in the mirror. But I always advise this, and this is something I particularly advise women to do, is try really hard to take the emotion out of it, letting yourself fester to the point where you become so emotional that you can't articulate clearly what it is you're trying to say. And all somebody sees is the emotion versus hearing the facts. So it's just take that big, deep breath, have your facts, and then speak your truth.
I also say to someone that going into that discussion, maybe you can start with, I need to test talk something with you. Can we try something out here? Just to make like it a bit smoother from the beginning. Still having all the facts, as you say, and more that I need to try this on you. How does this sound? I've been thinking about this. So let's do a test talk and see where it lands. And maybe that also invites for more conversation than this is wrong or this is bad.
Sometimes that's a really great way to get the emotion out of it. There have been several times where it has been less of a test run and more of a, I'm going to say what I really want to say, how I really want to say it so I can get it out. And then I'm going to take the deep breath and I'm going to go and have that courageous conversation without the emotion. So it can feel really good just getting it out and then repackaging it. Professionalism is important. There have been some interesting conversations with trusted personalities with what I really wanted to say.
I hope that everyone that feels that I need to take a discussion or take a conversation, even though it's hard, that they do it, because I believe that most of it will feel much better afterwards, at least that I had the courage to do it. So that will make you proud.
Yep. So if you have that practice conversation and somebody says, wow, it's been nice knowing you, they're usually wrong about how that courageous conversation is going to be accepted. So like I said, I can probably count the times that they went sideways on one hand. More often than not, people appreciate your honesty.
And it also shows if they are really good leaders at that point, because then they can say that, okay, good, I see a new perspective or so. And that can actually open up also for them to maybe explain something that you don't know at this point.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Sometimes we don't always have the full picture. But if somebody's willing to be transparent with us and give us the rest of the picture, it can be very eye-opening, building that trust. There's that word again.
I'm so thankful, Linda, for that you joined in today and having this conversation with you, because it has been really fun to continue the discussion we had from last time. And I hope that we will have a continued discussion further on.
Definitely look forward to it. And thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of the second part of this conversation with Linda Lenox. I hope you are leaving with the same sense of curiosity that I am, and with the reminder that confident leadership is built in the everyday moments, the honesty, the listening, and the brave conversation, and the willingness to stay human even when things feel hard. If you like to connect with either Linda or me, you find all the contact details in the show notes. And before we go, I'm hosting a couple of free masterclasses in early December. They are designed to help you to move from overthinking to confident actions and set yourself up for a strong, grounded start to 2026. I walk you through how to weave the confident framework into your day-to-day leadership in a way that actually feels doable. Make sure to reserve your free seats. The links is also, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for being here and for leading in your colors. Be confident. Be you.